Have you ever wondered what secrets the Catholic Church hides? What truths have not been told about its history? Get ready to discover shocking details that will change the way you see this millennium-old institution. Do you really know how the Catholic Church began? Or have you only heard official and legendary versions? In this section, we'll explore the origins of the Catholic Church, separating historical facts from the myths that for centuries have shaped our perception. The Catholic Church has its roots in early Christianity, which emerged in the 1st century AD within the Roman Empire. It is said to have been founded by Jesus Christ through his apostles, especially Peter, who is credited as the first leader or rock upon which the church would be built. However, historical evidence shows that Christianity began as a small and marginal movement, made up of various scattered communities with diverse beliefs and practices. There was not yet a unified institution as we know it today. During the first decades, Christians faced persecution and lived in secrecy, organizing themselves into very small groups. It wasn't until the reign of Emperor Constantine in the 4th century that Christianity received official recognition through the Edict of Milan in 313, which legalized the religion and marked the beginning of its institutional growth. From that point on, the Church began to structure itself as an organization with hierarchies, rules, and centralized leadership in Rome. A widespread myth is that Peter was the first pope with absolute authority from the beginning, but in reality, the papacy gradually developed over centuries. The figure of the pope as supreme leader and the Church's monarchical structure emerged as responses to the need to unify doctrines, control heresies, and maintain order in a growing religion. For example, the first councils, such as the Council of Nicaea in 325, were crucial in defining dogmas and strengthening ecclesiastical authority. Moreover, the early Church absorbed many traditions and practices from the pagan and Roman worlds, which helped its social acceptance, but also caused internal debates about what should be preserved or rejected. In summary, the origins of the Catholic Church are complex and not as clear-cut as they are often presented. The current institution is the result of a long process full of adaptations, conflicts, and political and theological constructions designed to provide stability and power to this growing religious community. Understanding this history allows us to better grasp its true role in world history and culture. Have you ever wondered how the Catholic Church went from being a small, persecuted sect to becoming one of the most powerful institutions in history? In this section, we'll explore how the Church consolidated its power from the times of the Roman Empire to the Middle Ages, a process full of strategy, alliances, and transformations that forever shaped its influence in the world. After the Edict of Milan in 313, when Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity, the Church began to grow rapidly, not only in the number of believers, but also in political and social power. Constantine himself played a decisive role by convening the Council of Nicaea in 325, which sought to unify Christian beliefs and establish official doctrine. This event not only strengthened internal cohesion, but also laid the foundations for centralized authority, with Rome as its epicenter. From then on, the Church became closely integrated with imperial power. When the Western Roman Empire fell in the 5th century, the Catholic Church took on a vital role in maintaining social and political order. The Pope evolved from being a spiritual leader to a temporal power figure, mediating between peoples and rulers. This process was accompanied by the accumulation of land and wealth, which further increased its influence. During the Middle Ages, the Church became a true political force. The alliance between the papacy and kings was fundamental to consolidating its dominance. Popes could crown and legitimize emperors, as in the case of Charlemagne in the year 800, reinforcing the idea that earthly power also depended on divine authority represented by the Church. This symbiotic relationship granted the Church enormous control over European society. However, this power was not without conflict. The struggles between the papacy and monarchs for political control, such as the investiture controversy, marked medieval history. The Church also shaped the feudal system, influencing social and economic organization. At the same time, the centralization of power led to an ecclesiastical bureaucracy that regulated not only religious life, but also civil matters such as marriage and education. Furthermore, the Church became the main promoter of culture and knowledge during the so-called Dark Ages, through monasteries and universities. However, its great influence also generated criticism and tension, as its absolute power led to abuses and corruption, planting the seeds of future reforms. In conclusion, the consolidation of the Catholic Church's power was a gradual and multifaceted process. From a small persecuted community, the Church skillfully used historical circumstances to become a central institution in Europe's political, cultural, and social life. This dominant role defined it for centuries and laid the foundations for its global influence today. Understanding this process is key to grasping not only religious history, but also the political and social evolution of the Western world. Do you really know what the Inquisition was and what its true impact on history was? The Inquisition is one of the darkest and most controversial chapters of the Catholic Church, but also one of the most misunderstood and surrounded by myths. In this section, we'll uncover what it really was, what motivated it, and what its consequences were, separating exaggerations from historical reality. The Inquisition was a religious judicial system established to detect, judge, and punish heresy, understood as deviation from the official doctrines of the Church. It originated in the 12th century, when the Church began facing heretical movements that threatened doctrinal unity and ecclesiastical authority. It was an institutional response to preserve faith and social cohesion, but over time, it became a tool for social and political control. Contrary to popular belief, the Inquisition was not a single institution, nor did it operate uniformly everywhere or at all times. The most famous one is the Spanish Inquisition, established in 1478 under the direct authority of the Catholic monarchs. However, local inquisitions already existed in France, Italy, and other regions, each with its own particular characteristics. During the Inquisition, those accused of heresy could be subjected to interrogations and trials, where methods now considered unjust, such as torture to extract confessions, were used. However, it's important to note that procedures followed certain legal norms for the time, and not all the accused were condemned or executed. The number of victims remains debated, and the death toll has often been exaggerated to reinforce the Church's negative image. The Inquisition also targeted converted Jews suspected of secretly practicing their old faith, converted Muslims, and other groups considered a threat to religious unity. In some cases, witchcraft and superstitious practices were also pursued, though with less emphasis. Over time, the Inquisition lost strength, especially from the 18th century onward, with the Enlightenment and the rise of ideas about human rights and freedom of thought. It was officially abolished in the 19th century, though its effects left a deep mark on history and public perception of the Church. In summary, the Inquisition was a complex mechanism with religious, political, and social objectives. It was not merely a machine of terror, though it did commit serious abuses and errors. Understanding its historical context and nuances helps us achieve a more balanced view, recognizing both its intentions and its consequences, and avoiding simplistic stereotypes that distort history. This understanding is essential for analyzing the Church's role in difficult and controversial moments of its past. Did you know that throughout its history, the Catholic Church has faced enormous internal crises that forced it to reform and reinvent itself? In this section, we'll explore episodes of corruption, controversial popes, and reform movements that brought about deep transformations within the Church, often omitted from traditional narratives. During the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, the Catholic Church accumulated great political and economic power, but this growth also brought abuses and corruption. Some popes of that era were known more for their personal scandals, nepotism, and accumulation of wealth than for their spiritual leadership. For example, Pope Alexander VI of the Borgia family is remembered for his unholy conduct and his use of the papacy to favor family and political interests. Such behavior undermined the Church's credibility and generated growing discontent among believers and religious leaders. The luxury and opulence of the Vatican contrasted sharply with the poverty of most people and with Christian teachings on humility and service. In addition, the sale of indulgences, forgiveness of sins in exchange for money, became common practice and caused a deep moral and spiritual crisis. This practice was one of the key triggers of the Protestant Reformation in the 16th century, led by Martin Luther, who publicly denounced these and other corrupt practices. The Reformation was not only a religious critique, but also a movement that challenged the structure and power of the Catholic Church, forcing it to respond with its own counter-reformation. Through the Council of Trent, the Church undertook internal reforms to correct abuses, reaffirm doctrines, and renew its spiritual commitment. This council was essential in redefining the Church's role and strengthening its authority in the face of new Protestant movements. Beyond the Protestant Reformation, other internal renewal movements sought to return the Church to its spiritual roots. Religious orders such as the Jesuits emerged to promote education, evangelization, and moral reform both inside and outside the Church. These initiatives had a significant impact on revitalizing Catholicism and expanding it globally. However, the struggle between corruption and reform didn't end there. Over the centuries, the Church has continued to face challenges related to transparency, power, and ethics. Many popes and religious leaders have worked to clean the institution's image and adapt it to modern times, though the process has been slow and controversial. In summary, the history of the Catholic Church is marked by deep internal crises that forced it to renew itself. Corruption, controversial popes, and reform movements are essential parts of understanding how this institution has survived and evolved. Recognizing these episodes helps us gain a fuller and more honest view of the Church, beyond idealized images or simplistic criticisms. Do you know how the Catholic Church managed to expand throughout the world and become a global institution? In this section, we'll analyze the role that missions and colonization played in spreading Catholicism beyond Europe. Starting in the 15th century, with the voyages of great explorers like Christopher Columbus, the Catholic Church found a unique opportunity to spread its faith to new territories. Evangelization became a top priority alongside the political and economic expansion of colonial empires, especially Spain and Portugal. Missionaries, mainly Jesuits, Franciscans, and Dominicans, traveled to the Americas, Africa, and Asia to convert indigenous populations to Christianity. This expansion was not free of conflict and controversy. On the one hand, the Church brought education, healthcare, and protection to many native communities. On the other, evangelization was often tied to cultural imposition and the justification of colonial domination, which caused resistance and suffering among indigenous peoples. In some cases, Christian faith blended with local traditions, giving rise to syncretic expressions and new forms of religiosity. Before continuing, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss more content like this. That way, you'll always stay up to date with our next videos. Now, let's continue. Moreover, the Church's expansion encouraged the creation of new ecclesiastical structures, with dioceses and seminaries established in distant territories. The Church adapted to different cultural and political contexts, consolidating itself as an institution present in nearly every corner of the planet. This process was key for Catholicism to become the religion with the most followers in the world. However, it also sparked debates about the Church's role in colonization and the social and cultural consequences of this expansion. Understanding this stage is essential to comprehend how the Catholic Church achieved its global reach and how its historical actions continue to influence many societies today. Missionary and colonial expansion is a crucial chapter in the Church's history, full of achievements, contradictions, and important lessons. Have you ever wondered how the Catholic Church has faced modern challenges that have tested its authority and relevance? In this section, we'll explore how the Church has responded to social, cultural, and scientific changes from the modern age to the present, facing crises and reinventing itself to remain relevant. With the Enlightenment in the 18th century, reason, science, and the questioning of traditional authority gained strength. Ideas about freedom, democracy, and human rights began to challenge the absolute power the Church had exercised for centuries. This was a moment of deep tension, as many monarchies allied with the Church were overthrown or reformed, and ecclesiastical influence over politics and education was greatly reduced in several countries. The French Revolution was a turning point. The Church lost properties, privileges, and control over education, facing the secularization of the state. In many places, Catholicism was relegated to a more private role as the state took a more prominent position in social life. This process was painful and caused deep divisions both inside and outside the Church. The 20th century brought new challenges, world wars, scientific advances such as the theory of evolution, and social movements questioning traditional morality. The Church responded with efforts to engage in dialogue with the modern world, but also faced internal and external criticism, including scandals and crises of faith. The Second Vatican Council, held between 1962 and 1965, was a key response to these challenges. The Council sought to modernize the Church by promoting openness to dialogue with other religions, adapting the liturgy to make it more accessible, and emphasizing human rights and social justice. It was a radical shift aimed at reconciling tradition with contemporary realities. However, adaptation has not been easy or complete. The Church continues to face challenges such as the loss of followers in some countries, internal divisions between conservative and progressive sectors, and the need to address current issues such as sexuality, the role of women, and abuse committed by members of the clergy. In summary, the modern history of the Catholic Church is that of an institution that, despite its centuries-old power, has had to learn to coexist with modernity, sometimes resisting, sometimes adapting. This process continues today, and understanding it helps us see the Church not just as an ancient power, but as a living community constantly seeking relevance and meaning in today's world. Do you know what role the Catholic Church plays today, and how it faces the challenges of the 21st century? The Church remains one of the most influential religious institutions in the world, with over 1 billion followers. However, it now faces complex challenges that test its authority and mission. Among the main challenges is the growing secularization of many societies, where religion loses ground to a more scientific and pluralistic worldview. Additionally, scandals related to abuse within the clergy have severely damaged the trust of many believers and generated demands for transparency and justice. On the other hand, the Church seeks to renew its message and social role, focusing on issues such as social justice, environmental care, and interfaith dialogue. Pope Francis, for example, has promoted a vision closer to the poor and marginalized, emphasizing mercy and inclusion. The Church also uses new technologies to reach younger generations, striving to remain relevant in a digitalized world. In short, the Catholic Church today is an institution undergoing deep transformation, trying to maintain its essence while responding to the demands and challenges of a changing world. This tension between tradition and modernity is key to understanding its role in contemporary society. Have you ever wondered what the real impact of the Catholic Church is in modern society beyond religion itself? The influence of this institution goes far beyond the spiritual realm, affecting education, politics, culture, and social aid around the world. From founding schools, universities, and hospitals, the Church has been a key player in developing essential services, especially in vulnerable regions. Many Catholic charitable organizations work daily to support the poor, the sick, and the displaced, becoming a fundamental pillar for millions of people. In the political arena, the Church remains an influential voice in debates on ethics, human rights, and social policies, though its direct power has diminished. In many countries, its moral stance still influences legislation and public opinion, generating both support and criticism. Culturally, Catholic art, music, and architecture have left a profound mark on the history and identity of numerous nations. The Church also promotes values that influence the family and community life of millions of believers. However, this influence also sparks controversies and debates about the proper role of religion in public affairs. Understanding this multifaceted impact is essential to grasp the place that the Catholic Church occupies in today's world, and how it continues shaping entire societies. Now that you know the true history and profound impact of the Catholic Church, what do you think? Leave us your comment, share your ideas, and don't forget to give this video a like if you enjoyed it. If you want to keep discovering surprising stories and learn more about topics few people talk about, subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any new content. Thank you for joining us, and see you next time.